Welcome to Crash Course Injury Law with Joe Ghabour.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Crash Course Injury Law with Joe Ghabour, founder of Joseph M. Ghabour and Associates. Joe's a personal injury attorney licensed in New York, New Jersey, and Florida, who helps injured people understand their rights in clear, practical language, especially when the situation is unexpected and stressful. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today Joe and I are talking about dog bites in New Jersey and how liability works when an animal causes serious harm. Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm kind of looking forward to this conversation. I mean, I don't know about where you live, but in my neighborhood, everybody's got a dog, and I am curious. Occasionally you witness a little dog on dog aggressiveness, or you see on some app like so and so's dog nipped me, and I'm going to sue. I don't know. It seems like a gray area, and I'm wondering, yeah, in New Jersey specifically, there's dog bite statutes. I'm wondering how it works and what's the liability there, and what's the law say?
New Jersey has one of the strongest dog bite laws in the country because it follows a strict liability standard.
Hmm.
In simple terms, if a dog bites someone who is lawfully on public or private property, the owner is going to be responsible for the injuries caused by the bite. The injured person does not have to prove that the owner of the dog knew that the dog was dangerous or that the dog had previously bit someone. The focus really is on the victim's rights and not so much on the dog. So it's a strict liability, and when we say strict, we really mean strict.
And this is, I mean, not on a left field exactly, but I've heard this in on a personal level with friends, and it's like, well, you provoked the dog in some way. Given New Jersey's strict liability standard, would that be an argument that a dog owner could take?
Well, the strict liability aspect means that the dog owner is liable because the dog bit a victim, period. However, because New Jersey has comparative negligence laws,
Oh, okay.
if the person who was the victim here provoked the dog, or let's say, for example, attacked the dog or kicked the dog or what have you, and the dog bit him, the owner is still strictly liable, but the victim in this case would be given comparative negligence. What percentage of your action caused this to happen? Again, owner is liable, but if you provoke the animal, comparative negligence will come into play.
Got it. Some percentage of blame could come my way if I was acting inappropriately there.
Correct.
Joe, when a dog does injure someone, what factors decide whether the owner is legally responsible for the harm? And you mentioned earlier, like the strict liability standard in New Jersey. Are there other variables at play there?
Well, again, the first major issue that we evaluate is whether there was an actual bite, because
Hmm.
New Jersey's strict liability laws only apply to dog bites.
Okay.
We also look at where the incident took place. We also look at the injured person, whether that person was there lawfully or was trespassing. But beyond that, insurance companies and the attorneys, we always evaluate the entire situation. Okay, things like provocation, whether there was trespass, and we look at the conduct of everyone involved. In a case where injuries are caused without an actual bite, and this is very important because strict liability in New Jersey only applies to dog bites. But sometimes the dog or the animal will cause injuries other than a bite. So, they'll run through a person and, hurt their knee or hurt their back. Situations like that are governed by general negligence laws in New Jersey. So we look at the entire situation, what happened, where it happened, when it happened, why it happened, and then we can evaluate the case.
I see. Um, that's perfect. I mean, I'm thinking about different types of injuries. You were talking about different circumstances. Obviously, there's things other than strictly a biting incident. Uh, what tends to create the most complicated situations in these cases that you've seen? Are there just certain factors that are just like, oh, that's going to be very complicated?
Well, if someone was trespassing on someone else's property, that
Mm,
becomes a different situation, obviously. Um, a lot of times, the biggest difficulties with dog bite cases is insurance coverage. One, you have to determine who owns the dog, who is the dog owner in the situation. And you have to find out whether that person has insurance that would cover an incident like this. So for example, if the dog owner is a homeowner and he has homeowner's insurance, then homeowner's insurance will cover him. If the dog owner is a renter and she has, renter's insurance, whether her renter's insurance is going to cover a dog bite. If the dog is owned by someone who does not have any of these insurances, while there may be liability, while there may be damages, collecting on a claim is going to be nearly impossible unless the person who owns the dog has sufficient funds to pay for damages. But if the person is what we call judgment proof, which means that person, he or she, does not have any assets, does not have any insurance, does not have anything that we can, attach a judgment to collect, then that's going to be a case that unfortunately the victim is not going to recover any compensation for.
you're right. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, there's a seemingly very pleasant person who I see in my neighborhood, but I'm pretty sure they're unhoused, and they have a dog who is always with them, and very pleasant dog. But that would be a situation where if that dog did cause some harm, it would be one of those cases. Probably, I'm assuming that it'd be like, okay, you probably aren't going to get paid, so to speak.
That's correct. I just recently consulted with a client about a very similar situation where she was mauled by a dog, a pit bull, severe injuries, but unfortunately, the owner of the dog was a renter, was not actually a renter. He was living with someone who did not have insurance and did not have any coverage and doesn't have any assets. And unfortunately, her injuries were substantial, but she's not going to be able to see compensation because of that.
How do insurance companies typically handle these claims, Joe? Like what parts of the investigation seem to matter the most to them in your experience?
Well, generally speaking, insurance company is going to look at everything. So, what kind of dog, who owned the dog, where was the incident, whether or not there was any dog bite per se, whether there was other injuries aside from a dog bite, whether the person who was injured provoked the dog, whether the person did something that, caused the dog to act in such a way, whether the person was lawfully on the premises. And we see this a lot with, delivery drivers, whether it's DoorDash or Uber Eats or any of these companies where the delivery person, he or she is going to the front door to drop off a package and the person opens the door and the dog just comes out of nowhere and, bites them or goes right through them and, hurts their knees or their back or what have you. So we have to evaluate the entire situation. Insurance companies know for a fact that that's what they're doing. They're looking at the totality of the circumstances. Again, it comes down to also, is there any video evidence? We had a case very similar where a DoorDash driver, was delivering food and the dog just did exactly what I just said,
Yeah.
came out of nowhere, pushed her down, and
Grab
the
the
dog at
food.
that time, well, forget the food, he bit her
Yeah.
and caused her a scar.
Yeah.
And of course, we had video footage to show it,
Hmm.
and that helped out a lot in that situation.
What about when kids are involved, right? Which I'm guessing must happen. How does that influence how liability and damages are viewed? Does it have an impact? I mean, obviously, I'm thinking about like a jury situation. People are going to be more sympathetic if we're talking about a little kid. But how does that unfold?
Well, just by virtue of the fact that children generally are smaller in size than adults,
Hmm.
a dog can cause some serious damage. And
Yeah.
not only can it cause physical harm, it can cause a lot of emotional harm as well,
Ah,
because it's not
trauma.
as an easy situation, especially when you have like a pit bull or a German Shepherd dog. Not that I'm isolating those dogs per se, but
Yeah.
those dogs tend to be bigger in size, and if they attack a child, the chances of that child having serious injuries is much higher than an adult who's 200 pounds, 6'5" or something. It's a different situation. So they suffer from a lot of injuries. Of course, if it ever gets to a jury, kids are going to be more sympathetic. The good thing with children is that they're much more resilient, so that, they'll bounce back in terms of physical ailments,
Hmm.
not necessarily emotional ones, but physical ones. They'll bounce back, but again, they will have scars because their skin is much softer when they're
Hmm.
younger. So all these things will factor into it. And obviously, in
Got
front
it.
of a jury, a child is going to be much more sympathetic than, like I said, a 6'5" individual who is much bigger in stature than a little child.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe not everybody, but there are people, grown-ups in our world, where I'm like, oh, you're not into people who like, oh, I'm not really a dog person, or people who are afraid of dogs, and I find that it's not uncommon to find out that they had a traumatic childhood experience with a dog, and they're kind of like, I'm good, thanks, keep your dog over there.
Yeah, it's definitely not uncommon. And again, it's I don't like to blame, any specific breeds of dogs. I always, look at, how the person who owns the dog has, trained the dog. I mean, they have to be trained. They have to be trained to be social, to be around people. If you're training your dog to be a guard dog, we're gonna have a problem because that they're doing what they're taught to do, which is to protect whatever area they're supposed to protect, whatever people they're supposed to protect, and they will die doing so. And unfortunately, in the process, if they harm somebody who has nothing to do with anything, that becomes very, very serious.
Yeah, that's some tragic stuff. What about just thinking about here? What can we leave people with? For someone who uh, maybe they're dealing with a bite that caused scarring. You mentioned that earlier. Maybe there's nerve injury, long-term effects that show up. What tends to shape how the claim progresses? Because obviously we're dealing with insurance companies here and opposing counsel and such.
Of course, the long-term medical outlook becomes extremely important in these types of cases. We often have to work with the treating physicians, specialists, to understand whether there's going to be the need for additional surgeries,
Mm,
or whether there's going to be any scar revision procedures that need to be done, whether there's going to be any therapy, whether it's physical therapy or emotional therapy that
wow.
needs to
Yeah.
be, undertaken by the victim. What the future is going to look like in terms of medical treatment. A lot of times, like for example, plastic surgery is not usually covered by insurance, and if you have a person who got mauled and there's substantial scarring, they're going to need many surgeries in order for them to have a resemblance of a normal, situation or a
Yeah.
normal figure before the accident. So situations like that, we have to really evaluate it and get ideas from the doctors and the specialists as to what we're looking at in terms of future medical expenses.
Mm,
Someone has to pay for that. And,
yeah.
if the insurance is not going to cover it, then the person who is at fault really should cover the future medical expenses in these situations. So, the claim is shaped by the injury itself. It also is shaped by how it actually affects the person's daily life, their confidence, their ability to work, their ability to hang out with people that have dogs, for example.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
said, some people say, I'm not a dog person. Well, that may have come from trauma at one point. So if they used to be a dog person, now they no longer are, that's going to factor into the claim as well. And also the emotional well being of that person. So in serious injury cases, and trust me, there can be serious injuries with dog bite cases or, dog injury cases in general. It's always important not to rush to a settlement. It's always important to get an idea as to what the injuries are, to see what the outcome is going to be, what the long term prognosis is going to be, and how much it's going to cost to get you to a position where you are comfortable, or coming back to what we call maximum medical improvement, that this is the best that it's going to get for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Good to hear that, sort of in its entirety, because there's a lot of uncertainty and you don't know what the future holds. But obviously, to work with someone who's got some experience and be like, okay, well, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, but we do know certain, there are special, whether it's the plan, you can only do this surgery once a year, you know what I mean? Like the reconstruction or whatever it might be. So there is an opportunity there to uh, get whole, so to speak. So,
Right, and I have to tell you, these reconstruction surgeries are very complicated.
yeah.
So it's not like, you're going in for a 20-minute procedure. You're
Yeah.
going in, you're going under for hours upon hours, and that's just it's
Yeah.
serious. So
Yeah, it's
it's
not
always
stitches.
important to make sure make sure all this stuff is documented and that you're in the best position possible to get compensation.
Got it. Well, listen, Joseph, thanks for sharing all that. We're up against time, which always happens, but it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Crash Course Injury Law with Joe Ghabour. To learn more about New Jersey's dog bite laws and your rights after an injury, visit Joe's website, ghabourlaw.com. You'll find straightforward resources there that'll help you understand your options. Thanks for listening. And, if you found this episode helpful, leave us some thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the show, or leave a review. We really appreciate it. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.